by organized crime and vice versa. We have Hezbollah, we have Hamas, we have Boko Haram, we have other groups where they're all financed through, like Hezbollah, Operation CETA of Interpol, financed by drug trades in Europe and others. Now, because of the events in Afghanistan, I thought maybe I go into illicit flows that we have seen in Afghanistan. Now the Taliban have been financed by 1.6 billion income a year. That's a lot of money. You can drive a lot of people. You can tell soldiers that they are badly paid and malnourished, that they can come over and sell their weapons. Now here, the first is drugs, 560 million income. Afghanistan is the largest producer of opium and heroin, with 90% of world market. And interesting is that the Taliban, before the 2001, had brought the opium production to zero. After NATO went into Afghanistan, the production popped up again because Taliban needed finance. And drugs is not only opium and heroin, it's now also crystal meth. They found a way of production that is cheaper and better than the production in Europe, and now they are flooding the world market with crystal meth. In 2017, the UNODC reported that we have another crop in Afghanistan reaching 9,000 tons. It was a new high in the production. And then the Russians stepped out and were complaining because they said a lot of the heroin is going to Russia and the former Soviet Union countries. And in Russia alone, 30,000 people are dying every year on the misuse of heroin. Now we have seen a similar, since 2001, a lot of the heroin went to the United States and was part of the opioid crisis. And you could say that the Taliban fought with drugs on American soil. So at least, they tried to. The next is mining with 537 to up to 623 million. Now, this is another interesting fact because you see it in generally that terror groups are more and more financed by environmental crimes. This is not unusual. It's 38% of all income of these armed troops is now coming from environmental crimes. Extortion, taxes, it's all known. Charitable donation also. Exports. I mean, later on they talk about trade-based money laundering. Export is nothing else than the trade-based money laundering we have seen with Hezbollah and with other groups. And last not least, real estate. As I said, 1.6 billion income for the Taliban to be used in this fight against NATO was a lot of money. And there was a lot of illicit financial flows that could have been stopped. Corruption was another serious problem in Afghanistan. The United States of America generously put up to $145 billion as reconstruction money into Afghanistan. This is more than the Marshall Plan for the 18 countries at the end of World War II to recover, and on an inflation-adjusted basis. That means they spent more on one country than in total on the Marshall Plan that worked. The difference between the Marshall Plan and the money that was spent on reconstruction in Afghanistan was that for the Marshall Plan, the President of the United States was responsible personally, and the US Congress was monitoring the funds. Whereas in Afghanistan, there seemed to be no monitoring, or at least according to the special inspector general that is reporting to the US Congress. And he said that, or they made a figure just recently, that up to 30% of this 145 billion, plus all the money from other sources, like from Germany, were like 20 billion, were more or less stolen, ended up in Dubai or somewhere else. So actually, the government was eroding in Afghanistan because of corruption. And we have seen that a lot of these former government people were the first to leave the country. Now, this is a chart I have shown at Panama, and I just thought I'd show it again. The left side says that the president of the Central Bank of Iraq says that $1 billion a week is leaving Iraq. And of the $1 billion leaving Iraq, 800 million is loaned money. Everybody can read it. I mean, the reports on Afghanistan are published quarterly since 2008. The same is true on Afghanistan. See, this is a SIGIR report. The Americans installed at the airport in Kabul machines to count cash, and the elites just circumvented these machines. So everybody knew the money is leaving Afghanistan. The good signs. On the 5th of August, there are several families of American families that had their sons or daughters killed or injured in Afghanistan filed a suit against Deutsche Bank, Danske Bank, and Standard Chartered, with the reasoning that they laundered money for the Taliban. This is outrageous if proven right, because it means that banks from Europe have financed the enemies of NATO. So I think it's a very interesting aspect, and maybe the straw that will break the camel's neck. Because I see this for so many years and nothing has changed. And I will explain. First of all, I want to go into the lesson from Afghanistan. I don't think we can expect that the United States of America will use military means in the near future in the war against terror, not troops on, boots on the ground. And also the other option, what they call the over-the-counter capabilities, I think are very limited. We have seen the results in Kabul on one of the last days when 11 from one family were killed. So what I'm advocating for since 20 years is our sharpest weapon in the war against terror, against organized crime, and against autocratic systems like Russia, like China, is AML-CFT. Follow the money, confiscate it, and people will stop hurting us. Now, I don't have the upbeat view like my friend has shown before. In July, the European Court of Auditors published a report on European banks, or the financial sector specifically. And we all know that many European banks, not only the three mentioned, were involved in heavy money laundering in the past. And as you can see, that the European Court of Accountants concluded that the AML-CFT regime in Europe isn't working. It's not my words, this is the Court of Auditors. I can add that, since 2004, I filed total 5 complaints with the Commission. Two of the complaints because member states were not complying with the directive, anti-money laundering directive. Two of the complaints turned into infringement cases, but nothing happened. And the same is true. I just recently filed a complaint with the German Constitutional Court. When I add to this that, it's not only the European, also the US has very severe weaknesses in the AML-CFT's approach. Then the question here arises, how come, for example, for Germany, that Germany is not applying or enforcing the German Anti-Money Laundering Act that was enacted first time in 1993. So we have laws that are from 20 years ago and are still not enforced. What happens here? We have a legislator that should cry foul, but nothing happens. And this is so astonishing. It's the same with the European Union. I'm working with the Commission, and year after year after year, we get new action plans, we get new proposal how to do it, but no action. Nothing happens. This is why I can quote the Executive Secretary of the Financial Action Task Force, who said, everyone is doing badly. That means we have a worldwide deficit in enforcing of AML-CFT rules. Now, if I come back, the only weapon left against terror, organized crime, and autocracy is the fight against money laundering and confiscation of illicit funds, then I ask, what is going on here? How do we want to defend our democracies? In June, we had the NATO communique. It was very interesting because it said we have three enemies for NATO. The two are autocratic states that by means of hybrid warfare try to destroy our democracies. This is Russia and China. And the third, interestingly, is climate change. Now, for the two former, for the Soviet Union, or for Russia and for China, how do we want to fight them? In a world with nuclear weapons, I don't see the possibility of using military means without risking a new world war. Now, what is the result of all this? For years, we see the studies about the recession of democracy since 15 years. And there is no change in sight. Affected are also the former democracies like the United States, like all the others that were thought to be above any having problem with democracies. No, see, they are now in the middle of it, and when we see that what happened in the United States, it's just a sign of it. What we don't like to see is this is interference from outside, and we should stop it. Now, I'm in a country, and I'm very proud to be here, because they know how difficult this is once you lost democracy and the rule of law to regain it. I come from a community. We have a very strong Hungarian population, inhabitants? What are you? Citizens. And as a child, I saw what was happening because my father was from the East and had to flee. So I tell you, we might see this again. Now, I've shown you that NATO says the third enemy is climate change. How do we want to fight climate change? CO2 certificates? Yes, why not? Make gasoline more expensive? Why not? But we have to fight organized crime, because especially in Africa, They're exploiting the country. They're destroying nature. You know, this is a report from the World Bank. It says that, you know, illegal logging, fishing, and wildlife poaching is a cost of $1 to $2 billion. And how do we fight them? Only by anti-money laundering, going after proceeds, because this stuff is sold in Europe or in China or wherever, but it doesn't end up in Africa. Now, this is what I already said before, is that it's interesting that environmental crime is becoming very popular by terror groups, by armed groups, and this is why this fight against climate change has to be fought differently, very differently. This also means we have to change in the Western world. You know, this IFF here doesn't stand for illicit financial flows. It's a term from World War II. Identification, friends, foe. We got to make sure that we identify the enemies like NATO did with Russia and China. But it's only not our direct foes, it's also the countries that help our foes, the so-called crime enablers that help with offshore structures. We heard about lawyers. With others, they help to funnel the money from this illegal business in our economies. And, you know, this is, I think, something we have to think about. Maybe it's too early, but it will come. Last not least, here I have a chart I have shown at the US Congress, December 2019. Nothing has changed. Money laundering can only be fought on a rule-based cooperation, in a cross-border rule-based cooperation. We heard about the FIUs. This is a step in the right direction, but it will be not enough. The second is that the G7 have to get back their control. We remember the Financial Action Task Force, the premier organization that fights